Analyze data to answer questions. This is course number 5 of the 8 in the Google Data Analytics Professional Certificate Program. I'm going to review it right now. You just got to analyze stuff. What is up, everybody? Matt Bratton here with TMBanalytics.com, your analytics career headquarters, back with another review video for the Google Data Analytics Professional Certificate Program. This time we're doing course number 5, which is Analyze Data to Answer Questions. This was another fun one, as per usual, and what the heck, let's just jump right in. Get on over here. So, as you can see, I've completed the course, and not only that, I gave it another 5-star. I was pretty happy with it. But I will be completely honest and say also that I was pretty angry with it at first. So, my qualms with this one that I eventually forgave were, I keep coming back to this idea that they're trying to introduce standards. They're trying to put nice little fences around things that, from my experience out in the wild, they don't have fences. They're just the way things are, right? So it's hard for me to sort of get into that mind space where, well, maybe we should call this something. Maybe we should put a label on that. Maybe we should put this box over here, that sort of thing. I experienced a lot of that. I have said before that I don't recommend going through this program the way that I'm doing it, but I'm going to tell you anyway, just as a reminder, that I'm going through this program taking the course exam first, and then I'm taking each individual weekly challenge quiz. So those are the things that you have to do to pass the course. And then I'm going through the content. And the reason I'm doing that is so that I can see where are areas that I'm, potentially deficient that I should actually brush up on a little bit. So that's thing number 1. But thing number 2, to also give me a sense for what they imply that you should be focused on based on the course content or the quiz content. So all that to say, typically when I go through these, I pass them on the first try. Not so much with this course. And it's pathetic because I took that personally. We're talking about analyzing data, right? This is what I've been doing the past 16 plus years, or since 2004, right? So I took it personally that I failed the first try on several of the tests. And when I would review the questions that I was missing, I was just like, how is that wrong? Like, that makes no sense that that's wrong. And I didn't understand what they wanted as the right answer. So until I went through the content, I came to realize just what it was that they were looking for. So now that I've kind of rambled for a little bit, I'm going to jump into the content and I'll show you some of the areas that I got hung up, and maybe, that'll help you. But week number 1 was all about organizing data to begin your analysis. All right. Great place to start. If you've got big, crazy data sets that you're working with, of course, you want to wrangle it in. You got to organize things before you get started. So I'm going to jump in here to everything. Of course, each one of these is going to start with week 1. It's going to review the course syllabus. It's going to talk to you about where you are in the whole process of the certificate, yada, yada, yada. So we don't need to talk about that. Let's jump right into data analysis basics. So it's going to go back over the analysis process for you. Just as a reminder, this is sort of repeat information just so that you're aware of where you stand in that process. And then we're going to get into the actual organizing data for analysis. So as you've seen in other videos, hopefully, that I like to focus on the readings, not just personally, but also because it's easier for me to show you some of the content that I think is worth showing. So the first thing it gets into is like tips for keeping data organized. It gets into sorting versus filtering, which are very, very basic concepts. So I'm going to tell you straight up, this is actually the sort of thing that I was missing questions on, because it would ask questions like, are you using a sort function, or are you using a sort spreadsheet? Are you sorting a column? What are you doing if you're doing XYZ? And in my mind, I'm just like, you're just sorting the data set. Like, I don't know what you want from me. Leave me alone. And invariably, I was choosing the wrong answer for some of these things because I'm like, I think it's this. I think you're sorting this. You're sorting a column. No, it wanted something else. So I would say if you're going through this, pay attention to the way that they're defining sorting, the way that they're defining filtering. They're going to get into, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but sort data and spreadsheets. So all of this stuff, like they've got videos sorting data sets, talking about the sort function, sorting and filtering sheets in Excel, and it gives you all sorts of, different things that you can do, how you can sort things. This is stuff that in week number 1, they're going to ask you questions about, and they're going to be on the challenge questions or challenge quiz. So pay attention to this. It's important to know. It's important to understand. I'm going to tell you from experience, the degree that they go to of like detail and specificity around what it means to sort and filter certain things, I just thought was a little obnoxious. So we got off on the wrong foot there. But you can see they beat sorting and filtering to death here with all the content. But I did want to jump back up real quick. They have this optional reading here. This one was good. It gives you exposure to BigQuery, uploading a CSV file into BigQuery, and then busting out some of the data set stuff, and you can kind of tinker with that in BigQuery, which is also a good experience to have. Sorting in spreadsheets, we just kind of talked a little bit about that. Another little sidebar comment that I want to make is they talk about the sort function, the filter function, sort by, these different functions. Now, I may make some people angry with what I'm about to say, and if that's you, put a comment somewhere and explain to me why I'm wrong. But in my decade and a half of doing all this stuff, working in Excel, I don't know how recent the sort and filter functions are. I think filter's fairly recent, but I have never used sort as a function. Okay. When I saw what they did with it in here, I looked at it and thought, well, that's dumb. Like, why would I ever do that? Like, I can't imagine a situation where that would be more efficient than a variety of other options that you have. I've used filter function before only because it was covered in another course that I took. And I had a very similar reaction, which was that is a heavy processing function, or it felt heavy to me. It just didn't seem efficient for what the output was. Now, I'm not saying that these are not useful. I'm not saying that there's not wonderful use cases for using these things. I'm just saying from my experience, these are not super helpful. I would much rather have a clean data set that you can either pivot off of or do something else where it's, the processing is much cleaner, faster, and you're allowing less room for error. I feel like those introduce room for user error or like creator error, all that. So get off my soapbox there. Enough about that. You can tell that I've got strong opinions on this stuff. Again, we're getting into the area of analyzing data to answer questions. Again, this is kind of what I do. So I have strong opinions, as I should. I think I should. All right, back on course, literally. So sorting data using SQL. So now we're out of spreadsheets and we're going to get into using SQL. So they talk about BigQuery. Again, they're reintroducing how to get in and do some practice activities. I did go in and do the quick labs practice course or practice lab here, which I thought was useful. It was a really good walkthrough tutorial, just getting into BigQuery, accessing some data sets, doing some stuff with it, loading some kind of canned queries actually, and then kind of walking through what the queries are executing. So overall, week one, once I got over the sort and filter hump and felt better about myself, I felt better about week one. So overall, it was okay. It was fine. Week number 2, formatting and adjusting data. Now we're speaking more to my heart. Converting and formatting data. So we get into converting data in spreadsheets. We talk about how to convert data types, how to convert, some of the more common things like changing from text to numbers or numbers to text, or changing date formats and things like that. These are all incredibly relevant, very useful things to know, things to be aware of and how to do, because believe me, in this field, you will do a lot of data, like converting data, right? It's kind of the way, because you're going to be pulling from so many different systems, or systems are going to be feeding data into a data warehouse. And if there's not a proper ETL process that already reformats certain fields, or even if it does, you may not want it in a format that you get it out. So you need to be able to make those manipulations on the back end as you see fit. So be that in SQL or be that in spreadsheets, doesn't matter. You need to be able to do it. So converting and formatting, this was a very, very helpful section. And then we get into transforming data in SQL, kind of like I said. So it talks through the cast function, which is incredibly helpful. There were questions on this in the tests for sure. So make note of a lot of this stuff here. And then it gives a lot of additional information, which was helpful. Now, fun stuff, combining multiple data sets. So manipulating strings in SQL. It talks about like concat, different areas here. I think places that you can practice this sort of thing. That's not what I was looking for though. Where's the join breakdown? I guess I'm not there yet. Manipulate. No, we already talked about that. We'll get there. I'm sure we'll find it. Advanced spreadsheets, tips and tricks. So this is another good thing because look, if you're going to be if you're an analyst, thing number one, more than likely, depending on where you're in the organization, what space that you're operating in, there's a high likelihood that you're going to be using Excel a lot. So the more you're spending in Excel, the more that these shortcuts, hotkeys, quick functions, whatever you want to call them, those are the time that you learn to do things in a short manner using your keyboard versus reaching over to grab your mouse, that adds up. Not only over a short period of time, but think about your career in all the time that you're going to save. So practice, read stuff like these keyboard shortcuts, lots of really valuable information. And this stuff, you can just Google this stuff, right? You can Google like little PDF spreadsheets and things like that. Hell, I might even just link to something like that in the description somewhere, but you can learn a lot of really good shortcuts that are going to save you time. And the more you get into Excel, the more you use them, the more you practice, the more you'll realize just how important those certain things are for you in your enjoyment of using Excel. I would say that the vast majority of the time that I'm in Excel, I've got my right hand on the direction keys and I've got my left hand on the control and shift buttons, and that's kind of pretty much home base for me, and that's how I navigate most things. I'll use the mouse occasionally just for various things that over time I've realized I think are more efficient to do with the mouse, but that's neither here nor there. So, and with that, that's week number 2. We're going to get into week number 3, aggregating data for analysis. So now, explaining your data aggregation, avoid common VLOOKUP pitfalls. Man, they put a lot of work into this whole VLOOKUP breakdown, and I don't want to say I'm disappointed. I'm not even sure if I'm surprised at this point, but VLOOKUP, there's so many better options, but I think that VLOOKUP, whether I want to accept it or not, is still sort of like one of those things that I don't want to say it separates experience levels. If people know what a VLOOKUP is, then it's like, oh, they're more advanced. They're not really. They're maybe intermediate at best. But knowing it and being aware of it is one thing. Knowing the shortcomings of VLOOKUP, knowing how inefficient and that there's so many better options is actually a better thing. So there is a point in here where they get into like index match, which even index match is a little bit out of date at this point because you've got XLOOKUP. Not everybody has access to XLOOKUP. So I am actually not surprised that they didn't dedicate a whole bunch of time to XLOOKUP, but if you're not familiar with it, look it up. But XLOOKUP kind of takes like the best of all worlds. It sort of simplifies what people were doing using index match, where it doesn't matter if you can have right to left, left to right references. It doesn't really matter. You don't need a specific table. You don't need to identify columns. You're looking at it's sort of a match from here to here and then a reference. It's super easy. You can account for errors. You can do different directional reference for what you're retrieving if there's duplicates and things like that. Lots of really cool things that you can do with XLOOKUP, but there are compatibility issues with it. So that's why I'm not shocked that it's not brought up here. They do, if you get further down, I think they get into index match. Maybe it's not here. I don't think it's in this section specifically, but you can see they go to great lengths to explain VLOOKUP. I mean, they're giving tons of resources and they're talking about, common issues and how to prepare. And these are all the concepts, right? So they beat it to death. I just feel like it was overkill for what VLOOKUP does. I think even for a beginner, it felt like a lot to focus on. But, again, I didn't make the course. So I'm not going to hold it against them. It stood out to me as something I found a little odd. Okay. Now we're getting, this is what I was looking for before, but now we're getting into SQL and talking about joins. So it goes into syntax, but then it also talks about the different types of joins. And you've probably seen these types of Venn diagrams before. There's a lot of really funny memes out in the universe as well. If you look up like SQL memes, I'm sure you'll see stuff like this, but it explains to you, what does it mean to have an inner join, a left join, so you can visualize the different types of joins that you're doing. So if you're joining data tables, what happens when you do an inner join versus a left join versus a right join versus an outer join, all those things. So it's important to have that conceptual, like spatial awareness of what happens when you put data sets together, right? So this is incredibly helpful resource. It talks through a lot of different things here, gives examples and stuff for you to walk through, and as per usual, lots of additional resources. And then secret identity. So now we talk also about aliasing, which is, it's important and something to be cognizant of, I think, as far as you have to be careful when you're aliasing. Same thing with if you're like creating named ranges or doing things in worksheets. When you're aliasing, right, the output is going to have whatever name that you choose to put on the top of a table. Depending on your audience, people may look at things differently depending on how you name that. So you need to be smart about your naming conventions if you're ever aliasing certain things, because you may send people off in the wrong direction. It could have issues down the road if people are looking at your output and they don't have access to your query. They're like, what is this field? Where did this come from? It's harder to sort of reconcile some of that work sometimes. So another best practice that a lot of people employ, which is putting your query in the back of a spreadsheet where you have your information so people can actually reference that, but that's a topic for another day. But they get into it here. And then we talk about subqueries very briefly. So it gives some readings, functions, like having, case when, if, count, and then it shows you what happens when you're doing a subquery and gives you additional resources and all that jazz. So good stuff. That was week number 3. On to week number 4, performing data calculations. All right, let's do it. Data calculations. So this section here, I'm going to skip the videos. I'm going to go straight into the functions. So here we talk about SUMIF versus SUMIFs, COUNTIF versus COUNTIFs, and addition. This is where it gets into index match and a few other things, right? So that's great. You can check this out here. But little fun fact, again, my strong, passionate opinions are going to show a little bit here, but I never use SUMIF. SUMIFs, some people call it SUMIFs. I'm not sure which one's right. I don't care. I call it SUMIFs. Is one of the most frequently used functions that I employ, deploy, whatever you want to call it. I use SUMIFs a lot. It is fantastic. It's a great function. Learn it, know it, love it. Okay, it can do everything that a SUMIF can do, and it can do it better. The syntax is more logical, at least to me. So for me, why on earth would you ever do a SUMIF when you can do a SUMIFs as your standard? You don't have to think through multiple syntaxes to accomplish effectively the same thing, and you can have multiple criteria. If you only have one, you only have one. If you have multiple, you're all set. So that's my little bonus nugget here. Same thing with COUNTIFs, is that, look, if you just get in the habit of using a COUNTIFs, then you have no need for a COUNTIF, and you don't have to worry about its existence. You can just focus on, hey, I can do one criteria or I can do many criteria. Let's just use a COUNTIFs, okay? And then index match and all that fun stuff. I would highly encourage you to learn that, and then also do a little bit of research into XLOOKUP if you're feeling frisky. And from there, pivot, 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 pivot. Now, anybody who knows me personally may be aware that I have a sort of irrational hatred for pivot tables. And I'd say a lot of truth is said in jest. And the reality is, no, I don't irrationally hate pivot tables. I just hate them in general. That's not actually true, but so maybe I do. No, so I have a long and sordid history with pivot tables where they are like the number one, I'll call it home wrecker of spreadsheets. Like, if you don't know what you're doing when you're creating a pivot table, you can cause some damage, and you can create bad pivots. They'll be horribly formatted, unruly. You could have all sorts of issues, and I like to use them for very quick slicing and dicing. That is it. I never incorporate them, if I can handle it, never incorporate them into models. I feel like they're somewhat volatile. And I've got strong opinions about them, and people could probably debate me and win on a lot of these things, but I just personally don't like using them. I will use them to check totals, do certain things like that, but in general, I stay away from them when I'm model building or doing certain analyses. I don't like making them a core piece of what I do. So with that vitriol in mind, proceed with caution. Understand that pivot tables, they're not difficult. They really aren't. They can be, in the right hands, very valuable. I like using them in a sense for pivot charts and things like that, where you can start with a pivot table, pivot all the data that you want, and then display a chart and have better controls and I like slicers and timelines and things like that. Those are cool in the right hands, set up right, well designed. If all you're doing is slapping a pivot table out there, best of luck in your future endeavors. But learn them, know them, you proceed with caution, and use your best judgment. But they are a powerful tool. Just be aware that there's someone in the universe like me who doesn't care for them. Okay. All right. I'm going to stop before I get in trouble here. All right. Learn more SQL calculations reading. So this is just talking about, it gets into Kaggle. It does some introduction here to Kaggle. Download a spreadsheet, CVS or CSV. What am I talking about? CVS. And walks you through a little exercise again. And from here, I didn't do these other practice quizzes and things like that because I'm just generally not doing those. But it's a good overview, something to walk through, get you some reps. And then data validation. This one's got a really good list here. So types of data validation. You've got data type, range, constraints, consistency, structure, code validation, lots of good things. And it's got little bullets and talks about purpose, examples, and limitations, which I like. I like clean, concise breakdowns like this. So good little overview here. Another Quick Labs ungraded thingamajig. And then finally, using SQL for temp tables. Now we're jumping into temp tables. So it's got some videos, some readings, more readings. So it actually gets you a lot of different stuff here, references for how to set up a temp table. It talks about how to do it in BigQuery, and then it gets into how to do it in other databases, not BigQuery, right? Important to note that, if you're using BigQuery, great, follow this syntax. If you're not, great, follow this rule of thumb. Okay. And then this is your intermediate guide to SQL, a little PDF, really good stuff, good content in here. Highly recommend that you download and take a look at. And then with that, weekly challenge in the course. So that is it. That is all for the Analyze Data to Answer Questions course. That's my review. If you have any questions, please let me know. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so. I drop content on all things analytics careers, one video every week at least. And hey, thanks for tuning in. Keep analyzing. Cheers.